Dad, come quick! What is this? I stared at the garden in disbelief. The vegetables we had worked so hard to grow were almost entirely gone. Brian rushed over, just as shocked, but our ninth-grade daughter had a different reaction. We need to give the culprit a taste of their own medicine. Mom, it's time to fight back! Her words ignited a fire in me. I can't let her see me this defeated. My name is Jessica. I live with Brian and our ninth-grade daughter. I used to work in an office, but now I'm a farmer. We took over my father-in-law's garden when he fell ill 10 years ago. Since Brian's mother passed away when he was in college, it's just been up to us to maintain it. We harvest seasonal crops like radishes, watermelons, and sweet potatoes. Surrounded by residential areas, our garden is one of the largest around. A decade ago, there were many gardens, but now they're replaced by apartment buildings. As the farming population ages, there's a shortage of workers, and maintaining these gardens became challenging. This led to gardens being sold off. With the new apartment buildings, the neighborhood's look and feel changed. There used to be a strong community bond, but now we only interact with a few. Even though we're not the community leaders, because of our sizable garden, the new apartment buildings association head, a man named Anderson, came to greet us. I promise we'll make sure our residents don't cause any trouble for those who've lived here for years, he reassured us. It put my mind at ease, especially since I had seen groups of young people gathering near the apartment and was worried about security. But soon, my fears would become a reality. Jessica, our crops have disappeared again. Brian, who went for the morning harvest, reported with a sigh. Again? It can't be animals or birds. We must have a thief. Shouldn't we install security cameras? Distraught over the continuous theft, I suggested this. Recently, crops ready for harvest were frequently stolen. As an initial step, we put up a sign. It warned that any veggie thieves would be reported to the police immediately. However, the culprit either hasn't seen the sign or chooses to ignore it, as he doesn't stop his thievery. No real damage has been done yet. Installing security cameras might end up costing more. If the loss becomes significant, then we might have to reconsider. Brian ponders with a deep hum. Even if we consulted the police, it's not guaranteed they'd patrol daily. Without concrete evidence of theft, they might not even investigate. Suddenly, our daughter Emily, who was listening in, chimed in. It's so wrong for someone to steal the vegetables you both worked so hard to grow. If you keep turning a blind eye, it might happen again, and they could take even more. If you won't set up cameras, I'll watch over them, 24/7. Emily, always thinking of her family with a strong sense of justice. I recall when she was in preschool. That's when I left my job to help out on the farm. It brings back memories of little Emily. She used to be picky about food, but once we began serving our own veggies, she devoured them. It tastes great because you and Dad grew it! Hearing those words made me even more proud of my work as a farmer. For our excited daughter and our customers, I resolved to sincerely nurture our produce. Of course, I'd be angry if these cherished vegetables were stolen. You have important exams coming up. You can't be on watch. I'll make sure to keep an eye out instead. Upon hearing this, Brian said he'd join in. And so, Brian and I took turns guarding morning and night. The thefts often occurred near the roadside. We were vigilant, expecting the thief to strike there again. A week of surveillance passed, and during that time, no crops were stolen. In the end, we never identified the culprit, but the fact that the theft stopped felt like a victory. Maybe they gave up because you both kept watch. It's a win for you two. Seeing our happy daughter, both Brian and I felt joy. Honestly, that week was tough. Guarding late into the night, even in shifts, left us exhausted from harvesting. Finally being able to sleep soundly felt like a relief. Yet, a few days later, the crops were stolen again. Hey Dad! Come over here! What is this? I went out to the garden early in the morning and was left speechless. The crops that should have been there were completely gone. Today was supposed to be the final day of harvest. Losing the spring cabbages was a big blow. Both Brian and I were too shocked to speak. But our daughter, Emily, reacted differently. We can't just stand here. Whoever did this needs to pay. Mom, it's time to fight back. Even though she must have been shocked as well, Emily was trying to cheer me up. I couldn't let my daughter see me in this pitiful state. A sense of determination rose within me. You're right, Emily. We can't sit around feeling sorry for ourselves. We decided to install security cameras as our first step. If someone tries to steal from us again, we'll be able to identify them. But that wasn't enough for Emily. Having a camera will prevent future thefts, but what about what's already been done? I can't let whoever made us sad get away with it. I've done some research. Let's plant these bulbs. I bet if the thief takes them, they'll regret it. Angry at the thief, Emily showed me a photo on her mobile phone. It was a picture of daffodils. Daffodils? They're flowers, and they're toxic. We can't eat them, right? I couldn't understand Emily's logic, and I was left puzzled. The stalks of daffodils look like green onions, don't they? I've seen news stories about people getting food poisoning every year from mistakenly eating them. If the daffodils haven't bloomed yet, could someone mistake them for green onions? Listening to her, I understood Emily's plan. She wanted to plant daffodils near the green onions to trick the thief into eating them. We grow green onions close to the roadside, and there are daffodils near the entrance. It seems Emily wants to transplant these daffodils during the green onion harvest season. I couldn't imagine anyone confusing the strong-smelling green onions with daffodils, but there's a chance the thief might not notice the difference if they come at night. Daffodils are poisonous plants that can cause vomiting and headaches when ingested. Indeed, if the thief eats them, they might be in for a rough time. But aren't there cases where people died from eating daffodils? What if the thief is an elderly person, and by some chance, they end up dying? Brian seemed less than enthusiastic about Emily's suggestion. Then Emily started speaking like a detective. In my opinion, the culprit isn't elderly. A friend in the next town over told me that around the same time our place was hit, a thief had burgled their neighborhood too. And the method? Just like ours. According to Emily, the thief starts by stealing just a little, as if tasting. Then a few days later, they come back and take a whole lot. Moreover, the places hit were always located along easily accessible roads. Another similarity. Maybe after tasting, they're selling stuff online. I've seen some sketchy individuals selling stuff anonymously online. Saying this, Emily showed her phone again. Displayed on the screen were cardboard boxes filled with a large number of fruits and vegetables. Yet there was no information about where they were grown, and they were being sold at incredibly low prices. I think if it were an elderly person, they'd only take enough for themselves or their family. This thief is taking so much because they're after the money. Unless we give them a bit of a scare, they're bound to keep doing it. Both Brian and I were taken aback by Emily's passionate explanation. She must have done a lot of research after finding out about the theft. At first, Brian was hesitant about Emily's idea, but after hearing her out, he seemed to change his mind. He proposed planting the daffodils only along the previously targeted road, and to ensure they weren't mistakenly shipped, they'd be extra cautious. I was a bit uncomfortable with the idea of deceiving even a thief, but the desire to not remain passive was strong. Furthermore, after hearing that we weren't the only victims, I really wanted to catch the perpetrator. Especially if they were not just eating, but illicitly selling the produce, it's even more unforgivable. Do they feel less guilty stealing from a field than a store? Perhaps they think they just get a slap on the wrist. We'll give them a punishment they deserve. Let's plant some daffodils that are easily mistaken for green onions, shall we? So, we decided to secretly set up traps along the field by the road. One day, Anderson and his wife Michelle, whom we hadn't seen in a while, came to visit. I heard that a thief got into someone's field and stole a bunch of crop. Hearing this, I shared how we also had several thefts in our field. Anderson reacted with genuine anger, saying how terrible that was. We should gather some volunteers and do some patrolling for safety, he suggested. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for Anderson's offer. We had already reported the damages to the police, and it summed up to a significant amount. However, they said it would be challenging to identify the culprits without any video evidence. Although the police could patrol the area, they could only do it sporadically. If volunteers were to patrol, it could deter the criminals. That's when Michelle, Anderson's wife, made a thoughtful proposal. I can create a shift system and even involve our son to manage the patrol team. Their son, in his 30s, was living with them and had taken time off work due to health issues. I had seen him once and remembered him being quite tall. When I expressed my gratitude, he smiled and said, "We're from the same community, after all." It was almost time to harvest the leeks, and the thieves might come around soon. "Who would have thought we'd be hoping for the thieves to show up?" Brian joked after dinner. Both Emily and I chuckled in agreement. That night, what we anticipated happened. "The leeks and daffodils are gone!" I woke up to Emily rushing in from the field. If I remember correctly, yesterday was an off day for the volunteer patrols. How did the thief know when there was no patrol? Rushing to the site, I saw a section of leeks had been harvested. Just as I suspected, not just the leeks, but the daffodils were gone too. From the looks of it, they probably just took enough for a taste test. "Let's check the cameras. The thief should be on tape," Brian said. Prompted by Brian's words, I decided to review the footage. In the video, a tall man could be seen entering the field. Then, a woman who seemed to be his accomplice got out of the passenger side and began loading the harvested leeks into their vehicle. We had strategically placed the security camera where it would be hard for the thieves to spot. Unaware of the camera's existence, they boldly committed the theft. "Wait, isn't that—" I'm taken aback, my hand instinctively covering my mouth. Brian, too, watches the footage with a stern expression. That evening, the sound of sirens leads me to check outside. An ambulance is parked in front of the apartment building. Being carried on a stretcher is none other than Anderson. A few days later, Brian and I decided to pay him a visit. "If we don't come back, please call the police," I request of Emily, deciding to take a voice recorder, just in case. 1 week after our greens were stolen, we visited Anderson's house. Once inside the living room, I asked, "We saw you on the stretcher. What happened?" "Oh, the greens Michelle brought home had daffodils mixed in," he begins. "I never imagined it would knock me out. I ate a lot, so my symptoms were severe, but luckily, Michelle and my son had milder reactions." Hearing his response, I nod to Brian and say in one breath, "Weren't those greens from our garden? We planted daffodils there to deter thieves. We were shocked when we saw the security footage. Michelle and your son were both captured on it." "Huh?" Anderson looks genuinely confused. The footage alone is solid evidence, but given they got food poisoning from the daffodils, there's no doubt someone from this household is the culprit. Well, we could have gone straight to the police. It was hard to believe someone as kind as Anderson could be involved. We wanted to hear his side of the story. His genuine ignorance suggests Anderson wasn't involved in the theft, which leaves Michelle, who was now trembling in the kitchen, as the prime suspect. "Have you been stealing vegetables and selling them all along?" Michelle, who oversees the patrol team, would know the best target, I suggest to her, noticing her clear agitation. There's no evidence that she had been selling the stolen produce, but Michelle's reaction confirms our suspicion. "So you're saying you were the one stealing around here?" Anderson, who seemed unaware of it all, shouted angrily. Seeing there was no way out, Michelle suddenly became confrontational. "Feeding people those wild onions on purpose is a crime! Besides, it's not a big deal if a few go missing. Someone gets to eat for cheap, so what's the harm?" I was pretty ticked off at such a ridiculous argument. "I only planted leeks and green onions in my garden. You stole and ate without permission. That's on you. Do you think veggies just grow on their own? We nurture them with care and love, and that's why they're delicious. Don't assume it's easy." Perhaps scared by my words, Michelle now turned her anger towards Anderson. This is all because you quit your job and took on that unpaid community leader role. I was worried about our retirement. I had to make some side money somehow. The idea that her side hustle was stealing was shocking. It seemed Michelle had threatened her son with eviction if he didn't cooperate. Thanks to the stolen veggies, they saved on groceries and made some extra cash. Michelle thought she could hit two birds with one stone. Hearing about stolen produce being sold without permission on the news, she figured she could do it too, and brazenly confessed. She hid the large amount of stolen veggies in a self-storage unit. That's why Anderson never noticed. This is clear theft. You can explain yourself to the police. Please, don't call the police! I beg you! She pleaded with me, but of course, I had no intention of not reporting to the police. Call the police! Please! Anderson spoke with clear determination. Given your husband's consent, we'll take the security camera footage to the police. Now it was Brian who said that. Michelle was sobbing, uncontrollably. You should be prepared. They'll probably dig into other possible crimes you committed, I added, leaving Anderson's house. As we left, we could hear Michelle's distraught voice screaming our name. Curious neighbors began pouring out of their homes. Words like thief and police echoed from the doorway, so some of them had probably pieced together what happened. They whispered among themselves, pointing towards Anderson's door. What followed next? We learned from Anderson when he came to apologize and pay for the inconvenience. Michelle and her son got arrested based on the evidence and her own confession. However, it seems the son is denying the charges, claiming he was coerced by his mother. This incident has undoubtedly shattered their family bond. Anderson decided to divorce and left the apartment complex. Even if his wife returns to that place, she'll undoubtedly be met with cold stares. How she will live being shunned by family and society remains to be seen. Given the severity of the crime, prosecution seems inevitable. See? My deduction was spot on, wasn't it? Hearing the outcome, Emily puffed out her chest with pride. Ultimately, thanks to Emily's suggestion, we caught the thief. We're hopeful that our precious crops will be safe now. We're determined to keep growing our vegetables sincerely for our daughter and our consumers.